consciousness is unfolding right before our eyes, highlighted by a flurry of recent new discoveries about the Milky Way Galaxy. The new discoveries include NASA's snatching from the heavens of a pure white crystal called stardust, mystery radio waves coming from the galactic center, and profound new looks at the Milky Way center. These discoveries are setting the stage for the unfolding of powerful new knowledge. These discoveries could be among the greatest ever made. But is it possible that the ancients already knew much about the galactic center that can aid our modern quest for understanding? Our guests today have been examining the perennial wisdom about our galaxy in this moment in time. John Major Jenkins and Jay Widener are two leading galactic center theorists who realize this is humanity's chance to utilize great galactic forces for spiritual renewal and the blossoming of humanity. John Major Jenkins, in his seminal work Maya Cosmogenesis 2012, deciphered the ultimate meaning of the Maya end date of December 21st, 2012, the date used by the Maya in their long count calendrical system. What Jenkins discovered was that the Mayan priests knew of this end date as the renewal and rebirth of a new world age resulting from the solar meridian crossing the galactic equator and the Earth aligning itself in humanity with the center of the galaxy. John, welcome to Dreamland.
Hello, William. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. One of the more significant encodings of galactic information into a stone monument is the Cross of Henday, located in Henday, France, as well as the cross at Urcos in Cusco, Peru. In his book, The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday and a Monument to the End of Time, Jay Widener cracked the code of this mysterious pillar of Henday, and he used that pillar as a needle to thread together a profound tapestry of secrets about our galactic center. Jay's a Hermetic scholar and a filmmaker. His DVD, Secret of Alchemy, is a Dreamland favorite. Jay, welcome.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, it's great to have you guys together. It seems like the last time I saw you guys together was back in Denver, Colorado a couple of years ago at an international book fair.
I think that's true, right, in the summer.
Uh-huh. It was like, as JFK, or used to say about JFK, he was the single greatest assemblage of brains since Thomas Jefferson ate breakfast together, or ate breakfast alone. And then we also have, this amazing confluence of ideas where you guys are really putting your heads together and coming up with some astounding new information. So once again, really a pleasure to have you together here on Dreamland. What I wanted to start with is a proposition of this idea that our galactic core is releasing new emanations, especially let's start with the news about radio waves coming from the galactic center. John, I'd like to begin with you, just as if you could provide us a basic picture of what lurks at the center of our Milky Way galaxy.
Well, as astrophysicists have been discovering, there are many galaxies out there, and many of them have black holes. These black holes are singularities in which there's a breakdown of time and space, and even light cannot escape from them. Now, what I would sort of put on the table from the vantage point of Mayan creation texts is in these creation texts, the hieroglyphs speak of creation happening at a black hole. I mean, the hieroglyph is literally translated as black hole. And this happens in the context of, it happens at the center of the sacred tree. So these Mayan creation texts are saying creation happens near the black hole at the center of the sacred tree. And we know that the Mayan sacred tree is the place where the Milky Way crosses over the ecliptic. And this place in the sky, in Sagittarius, is where the galactic center is located. So I think this is really, really intriguing information that the Maya may have been tuned into the fact that there is a black hole at the center of the galaxy, and it is the place of a great mystery.
Jay, you've also been doing a tremendous amount of work in terms of research with the Galactic Center, but more from an alchemical perspective. From that viewpoint, what are you looking at the Galactic Center? What specific pieces of information are you focused on these days?
Well, right now I'm looking into the idea that life and consciousness itself appears to be emanating from the Galactic Center. Wilhelm Reich, in his classic book, Cosmic Superimposition, touches on this a little bit, but what it is the Earth is surprisingly floating in the ecliptic of the galaxy, and Reich postulated that streams of what he called orgone, or consciousness-raising interstellar particles, were penetrating through the stream of the ecliptic, and the Earth rides in that ecliptic like on a stream. And right now we are beginning our tilt forward into the stream, and I think that is causing this giant change. I think when it's like a boat tilting into the wake, and it's at first it's a rocky ride, and then as soon as the boat gets into the wake, it becomes smooth again. I think we're in that rocky ride where the boat is trying to find its place inside the ecliptic stream of these incredible conscious particles which are coming from the center of the galaxy.
And so when you hear news, for example, about astronomers detecting an unusual powerful burst of intermittent radio waves emanating from the direction of the center of the galaxy, what does that make you think about?
I think we're in for the big change. I really do. I think the fact that this stuff is just all coming up all at once, and even Paul LaViolette has connected some of these emanations to earthquakes and tidal waves. I think this is all it is all connected, and I think it's really, truly amazing. We seem to be coming into contact with our consciousness to the reality of the galactic core. Kind of brings forth some of the New Age prophecies of the 70s and 80s, where we were going to join the Galactic Council and Timothy Leary and all these things. And then here we are at the beginning of the 21st century, and while we're not in contact with actual members of a galactic council or anything, at least I don't think we are getting in contact with the reality of what it is, what the center of the galaxy is, and why it is the most important object in our local neighborhood here.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that mythologically speaking, the Milky Way herself matches the myths of Isis and other great mothers who were connected to the symbol of the dove, the great bird, other such symbols. And I'm so intrigued by that inscription above the Isis's temple at Sais that read, yes, "I am that which is, which hath been, and which shall be, and no man has ever lifted the veil that hides my divinity from mortal eyes." If we assume, or just for a moment hypothesize, that Isis is symbolic of the Milky Way galaxy, it appears that we have lifted the veil that hides the black hole or the theoretical black hole at the center of the galaxy. And what I wonder, does this mean that we are transforming from mortal to immortal beings with such knowledge?
I think that Isis is the queen of the golden age, and she's the virgin of the world, and she is also represented by the black Madonnas. And should we remember that a lot of the Isis statues in Egypt were painted pure black. And I think this goes back to what John was talking about. It seems as if the Egyptians and the alchemists of medieval Europe knew about this black hole and knew that everything emanates from this thing. And this is why they painted the primal spirit of Isis is black, and I think that is exactly what's going on, and I think they knew it. Are we going to be immortal? I don't know, but if you really like to read something interesting, read Isis, Virgin of the World, from Manly Hall's Secret Teachings. And he quotes La Plagnon, who talks about how Isis permeates the planets and the stars of the entire, galaxy. It's really quite amazing.
John, if the myths of Isis as the great cosmic mother do refer to the galaxy, what are your thoughts from the Maya perspective, or even from the perspective of the perennial wisdom? Are we on track to lift the veil separating us from immortality?
That is what's going on, and there is a very deep connection between the ancient Isis archetype of the great transformer, as well as the Virgin Mary. And in the Mayan mythology, the Milky Way was very, very important, and they mythologized it in many ways. The Milky Way could be the Great Mother, and then the galactic center, which is basically visible to the naked eye. I mean, you can observe it. It's the wider part of the Milky Way between Sagittarius and Scorpio, and it has brighter stars there. And the Maya thought of it as the womb of the Great Mother. And it's really fascinating that, the Maya were adept stargazers, as I believe many of the archaic cultures were tuned into the celestial processes in which we, the consciousness on Earth, in which we are embedded. And they were tuned into these vast cycles of time. And what's interesting as a general observation is that, as Jay pointed out, these ideas about the galaxy and the transformative black hole and these cycles of time and these processes which catalyze consciousness and, as you say, William, stimulate an unveiling of the perennial truth, these processes are, and these symbols, the symbols of these processes are deeply embedded in the mythologies around the world. And what I found with the Mayan material is that it's right there. It's really clear. And the whole scenario is encoded into this galactic cosmology that pinpoints the years around 2012, the end of the Maya long count calendar, as the great transformative nexus.
Now, we have to look at another part of or aspect of this, though. I mean, we have Isis as the Virgin of the world, the great cosmic mother, but could she also be a great fire-breathing dragon in a sense, too? Because, Jay, you've done some incredible work on Fulcanelli's prophecy that the northern hemisphere would literally be scorched or torched by fire. How do we reconcile the two images?
All right. Yeah, William, that's a great question. The galaxy is really a hyperdimensional vehicle, and there's a black hole and there's a white hole. It's like a torus, where part of the energy is spewing out one side, but it's also coming in the other. Just because we're only seeing the part of the galaxy that's spewing material or taking material in doesn't mean that it doesn't change. And I think that there's like a polar reversal occasionally in the galaxy, in which suddenly the black hole, for a moment, becomes a white hole. And this gives rise to the legends of Sekhmet and Kali, and the goddess turned, I guess, wicked or dark, because at the end of the age, the center of the galaxy decides to cleanse the creation and create a new species or a new human. And I think that's what's going on right now. There's a cleansing going on. And so, yes, the galaxy is both a white hole and a black hole. It is primarily a black hole, but occasionally it flips and becomes a white hole for a brief moment.
This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with John Major Jenkins and Jay Widener. Jay, when we left off, we were talking about this idea of the black hole suddenly becoming white, and I know, John, you've also commented about the unheralded work, really, of Oliver Reiser in this connection. He was one of the early theorists that talked about our connection with the galaxy from a metaphysical as well as a scientific perspective, and also the possibility that higher doses of high-frequency radiation or cosmic rays could actually have a stimulating effect in a positive sense on evolution. Let's pull on that thread for a moment, John. Talk to us about Oliver Reiser and his influence on your work and what it means to us.
Oliver Reiser was an amazing philosopher and scientist, and he's very unrecognized for his pioneering insights. For example, he hypothesized that there would be found reverse magnetized rocks, and then geologists did find them, so we know that there have been magnetic field flips on the Earth in past geological ages. He also, in the 60s, he believed that basically he hypothesized the Schumann resonance, which is now known to science. Reiser was amazing. He did believe that evolution of consciousness, and as well as physical forms in the Darwinian sense, was catalyzed or stimulated by changing relationships to the galactic center, basically, in a nutshell. He was not aware of this alignment process, the alignment of the solstice sun with the galaxy, which happens once every 26,000 years, and which is why the Maya picked 2012 to end their calendar. But what I did in my book Galactic Alignment is I sort of synthesized the two perspectives, and then we sort of have a ready-made theory of galactic evolution when we use Reiser's ideas and then insert the galactic alignment information into it. Just as a general observation, though, I think Reiser's interesting because he was an amazing scientist. And as you mentioned earlier, scientists are finding that there's radio waves coming from the galactic center and so on. This is just to sort of point out that there are actual physical, empirically measurable things that are going on. And yet it is indisputable that there is also a kind of spiritual unfolding, or consciousness is being catalyzed. So what we have going on is really something that's affecting the spiritual domain as well as the physical domain, and that's really not surprising because, you know, it's the great alchemical synthesis at the end of the at the end of the process.
Jay, so many people are focused on the physical, but perhaps it's consciousness that is more sensitive in the aspect of ourselves that we want to be fine-tuning. What are your thoughts?
I completely agree with that. Consciousness sits at the outer perimeter of our reality. So as the first new penetrating whatever comes in, it hits consciousness first, then the physical later. So right now you're seeing, I don't know what to say about it, an incredible rising in consciousness. There's a fascinating teacher of Tai Chi in Seattle who's been teaching it for years. He's from Thailand. And he told me recently that people are picking up these complex Tai Chi exercises much faster now than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And he's at a loss to explain why this is happening. And the only answer, has got to be that there's something going on where the synapses of the brain are firing more cleanly and more efficiently, and people are beginning to wake up. It's really quite amazing and quite astonishing. I don't think that there's anybody who's fooled by much about what's going on in the political realms, and now the spiritual realms are beginning to open up. And it is really a fascinating time, and I don't know what to say. I think that the alchemy of consciousness is at hand. I think that over the next 7 years, we are in for the ride of a lifetime.
Yeah, I want to come back to that in a moment, Jay. Whitley and I had an opportunity to speak with John Hogue recently, and he had some alarming insights in that regard, and we'll talk about that in a later segment. But first I wanted to just kind of go through the news a little bit more. December 27th, 2005, NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope has discovered some of life's most basic ingredients in the dust swirling around a young star. We have another news flash from 12/22/2005. Spitzer exposes our galaxy's deepest secrets. Astronomers have at last found inner light. Oh, no. But they didn't find it through the typical earthly methods of meditation, exercise, and therapy. Instead, the light was discovered inside our Milky Way Galaxy after hours of deep self-reflection with NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope, which, by the way, is the replacement for the Hubble. The astronomers, who are members of the Galactic Legacy Infrared Mid-Plane Survey Extraordinaire, or GLIMPSE team, used Spitzer's heat-seeking infrared eyes to gaze at the dust-drenched plane of our galaxy. And when they did this, the galaxy's obscuring clouds of gas and dust became transparent, revealing approximately 100 new star clusters, each containing tens to hundreds of stars. Let's just talk about this confluence here that's going on between researchers, galactic theorists such as the three of us here and others, and what NASA is attempting to pull off here in terms of its understanding. Is there a total disconnect going on here, or at what point are we going to see the convergence of the spiritual with the scientific?
Well, in the realm of the scientific, I think that what's going on with these discoveries, which are very fascinating, is that the literal image is that scientists are penetrating into the heart of the galactic center. Okay, now that's in the realm of physical sciences. I think that that's a symbol of what's going on a spiritual level in other sectors of society. In other words, among the spiritual metaphysicians and meditators and spiritual seekers, they too are penetrating into the heart and core of the universe, so to speak, but it's happening on an internal level. In other words, and I think this is all sort of a function of the fact that the galactic alignment is happening. The Earth, through the Sun on the solstice, is lining up with the galactic center. So there may be demonstrable energetic effects because of that, but I think that on a spiritual level or on a level of consciousness, it is exactly what it sounds like it is. We are coming back into alignment with the galactic center or the cosmic heart and source.
Yeah, and going to what Jay said a moment ago about the black and the white holes, this is exactly what NASA is saying now too, that the recent discoveries of this newly formed group of stars discovered by the Chandra X-ray Observatory this time actually contradicts previous models that predict that stars should be torn about by forces from the black hole, but what they're finding is that these black holes are actually helping to create new stars, not just destroy them. So here we are, Jay. I mean, this would be a perfect opportunity to hit some of these scientists with some of the ancient alchemical data.
Well, one of the most vexing things in my entire life is trying to convince scientists of the hyperdimensional state of reality. I swear I don't know what's wrong with these people. They're incredibly intelligent. They know everything, but when it comes up against hyperdimensional reality, there's just a blank stare. I predicted 15 years ago that they would begin discovering white holes also at the center of the galaxy just because of the hyperdimensional model of alchemy that I was using. And now, indeed, you're right, they are discovering these things. And this is so incredibly fascinating. And what John was saying is just absolutely right. He's nailed it exactly. These are symbiotic relationships between the lining up of the center of the galaxy and what we're discovering and what science is discovering. There's a confluence of events that is absolutely amazing. I'd also like to bring to mind the work of Maurice Allais, who was a French scientist, who discovered that there are localized gravitational effects during eclipses of the sun, total eclipses. And these are localized right to the area where the eclipse is. And I think that when you understand what that is really saying, and there's been a lot of work proving that Maurice Allais is right, that you will begin to understand why the lining up of the center of the galaxy is a localized effect. It is not solar system. It is localized to the Earth itself. It is quite amazing, and we can talk further about that if you like at some other point, but it is verifiable evidence that there are gravitational and magnetic anomalous events at the center point of eclipses.
Yeah, let's come back to that in a moment. I wanted to pull one other news thread here, December 15th. From December 15th, 2005, the most energetic parcels of electromagnetic radiation, tera electron volt gamma rays, ever determined to have originated in the plane of our home galaxy were observed recently by the Milagro detector, located at high mountain elevations in New Mexico. The potent photons are believed to have been part of the debris spawned when even more energetic cosmic rays struck the matter-dense heart of the Milky Way. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with John Major Jenkins and John Major Jenkins and Jay Widener. Jay, just before the break, we were talking about another announcement of a high-energy phenomena in our Milky Way. Where is all of this headed? Have you made some predictions in terms of things that scientists are going to be discovering, or what are some of the things that we should look for that, quote-unquote, the big one is happening?
Well, they're looking at the center of the galaxy, and they're very interested in what they're looking at, and I can't deny that it's a little disconcerting to have NASA following John and my lead. And so, as they examine the center of the galaxy, it appears as if they're coming more and more into line with what the discoverer of, the Mayan and the ancient alchemical texts are saying. And I do believe that they are looking for a wave coming from the center of the galaxy. I think that they're actually quite worried about it. But this goes back to what you were saying earlier. Let's not forget that the particles that come from the center of the galaxy actually enhance consciousness and life itself. The head of NASA during the Apollo moon landings put some moon dust in some water and poured it into his potted plant that was in his office, and the potted plant shot up 300% growth in 24 hours. And the moon is coated with this interstellar dust, and it is a perfect depository of this material, and it may be one of the reasons why the Apollo landings took place at all. So NASA is very interested in this, and they're watching it, and I only hope that they tell us what they find. That's my biggest concern with NASA right now, is that they're going to not keep it secret, but just think it's not important enough to announce. But fortunately, we have people like Paul LaViolette and the three of us who are watching everything they're doing, and hopefully we can interpret exactly what their data is actually revealing.
Yeah, very well put. One of the stories in the ancient world that I wanted to ask you guys about is from the book of Exodus, which describes a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night that the Israelites followed. Is it possible that the Milky Way is that pillar? Could it have been seen as a pillar of cloud by day 3,400 years ago? And my follow-up would be, shortly after this is when God rains manna, cosmic particles, on the Israelites. So, two-part question then. Is it possible that we get a different view of the Milky Way at different times? And are these the times when we begin to experience a deluge of these cosmic particles?
Well, I'll take it, and then John can have it. Yeah, I think that's probably, there was some minor galactic center event back in those days, and that's exactly what they saw. I think that the galaxy lit up daytime. It glowed fiery red, probably, and blue at night, and purple. And that was the beginning of this raining of these particles, which alter consciousness itself. And I definitely believe that the story of manna is the story of these Reichian particles entering into our system.
Which is just generally to say that in ancient times there was an awareness of these vast cycles of time in which there's different periods where there's more intense energy coming in. And I think what's really going on, we were speaking of the discoveries that physicists are making and lamenting somewhat the closed-mindedness of scientists. And that's simply because science operates within the realm of the rational intellect, the discursive reasoning intellect. And what I'd like to sort of put on the table is that, it's not really the old battle between faith and reason or something like that. It's the limiting viewpoint of physics compared to the higher dimensional viewpoint of metaphysics. And there was an ancient metaphysics that integrated spiritual and physical happenings and observed the universe as a united whole, like the as above, so below principle. And this ancient metaphysics is starting to be unveiled, but it requires that we open up our higher intellect. We have to open up and awaken a higher intellect, what the ancients would call intellectus, or the nous, which would be the faculty of opening up to the transcendent wisdom. And I think that the particles coming in and the energy changes that are happening, it's almost like we have a higher organ that's trying to open up, like a flower opens up to the sun, but it's trying to open up to this subtler energy that's coming in right now.
And here's where some strange resistance comes in my opinion. One of the things I asked John Hogue about was the prophecy from Ezekiel 38, which was preceded by those in 36 and 37 that told of the dramatic rebirth of the state of Israel and a time when the Jews would pour back into the Holy Land. Then Ezekiel 38 and 39 talk about a dictator who would one day take over Russia and form an alliance with Iran and the radical Islamic world, and then would attack the modern state of Israel. Is it simply coincidence that this end-time prophecy is unfolding at the exact same time that the Mayan calendar is ticking to a close?
No, I think there's a deep intuition about the timing of these things and the conflicts that will arise. It's part of like what I refer to as the end times dynamic. We see this in the Maya creation myth. There's actually a prophecy in the Maya creation myth that we also see on the carved monuments of Izapa, which is the place that invented the 2012 calendar. We see information about the resistance of ego. Ego has to let go, and we have to transcend or surrender our attachment to illusions, which breed conflict. And it's when we engage in these processes of sort of purifying, I guess you would say, that we can then sort of open up to the higher viewpoint that can resolve what appear to be insoluble contradictions on this plane.
Jay, the prophecies of Ezekiel 38 and 39 about that coalition between Iran and Russia attacking Israel then opens the way for the prophecies of Revelation concerning the satanic imitation of Jesus, who is the Antichrist, who will appear to be a good man and who will in fact appear to be a savior in a sense, who will be assisted by a false prophet. But what we're told then is that this false prophet who will work apparent miracles, the one miracle to watch out for is that he will bring fire down from heaven. Now, when I look at that, I don't have a real problem with that. I think, look forward to a figure that could figure out how to bring fire down from heaven, because I think what he's talking about is the transformative consciousness and energy. What do you think?
Wow, this is like my favorite subject in recent months. I've been going around and around with it. Fulcanelli mentions that one of the attributes of the end of the age would be Saturn. And Saturn is, of course, Kronos, or the great timekeeper, but also he's Satan or Set or Lucifer. And I realize that, and also Saturn, or it will be the god of the golden age. And so I've been vexed back and forth as to, what is Satan, Kronos, Saturn? What does this mean? And by the way, the Cassini probe is up at Saturn at this very moment, finding all sorts of very odd things. So I think that they're trying to, there's a Saturnian sense that if they can end this age, the new age will begin. And so this is what's going on with all of these prophecies. I'm incredibly fascinated. And I have to say that if I had a book that had nailed prophecies like the book of Ezekiel or the book of Revelation, I would stand up and pay attention to those books. They have it nailed, and I can only say that every day they grow in efficacy, and I would pay a great deal of attention to what they're trying to tell us. It's like there's someone who can see the Alpha and the Omega, the end and the beginning of time, and they're telling us what the end of time will be like. And that's my real feeling about those books, and to me, it's almost as if there's a gigantic galaxy-wide computer program, and occasionally, like in the Matrix, we can see glimpses of the program itself. And prophecy, I think, are those glimpses.
But also, the Matrix as a hologram can become corrupt, too. The programming can become corrupted. Yes. And you look at this and you get the sense that, there is, without question, a blueprint that is being followed at a very high level within the U.S. government, within our coalition forces, within even those opposing. And when we come back from the break, I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We'll be right back.
In a recent Dreamland, Starfire Tour makes reference to Language of the Birds. Let's hear what William Henry has to say about his book.
The language of the birds is thought to be the original language that was spoken in the Garden of Eden. It's the mystery school language, and it's very interesting that she would bring it up because those in the know are constantly getting in touch with me saying, this is like your all-time best book. If anybody wants to get into William Henry material, they've got to read this because not only is it a great introduction, but it also represents the apex of sort of our mystery school understanding because this language offers the keys to the codes that opens up the mysteries. It literally puts you in resonance or in sync with the thought sphere of the mystery schools.
You can get William Henry's Language of the Birds from unknowncountry.com. Click on the store tab, then go to the William Henry section. You'll find Language of the Birds. Don't miss Language of the Birds, and don't miss WilliamHenry.net, William Henry's great website. Keep up with what he's doing and where he's going.
This is William Henry. This is Dreamland. We're continuing with John Major Jenkins and Jay Widener. Jay, before we went to the break, we were talking about this blueprint and this galactic program as we were describing it. Did you have more thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. Recently, I was studying with a scholar, French esoteric alchemy, and she was reading me a very obscure book by a French writer named Robin. And what Robin was saying is, and this was about 20 years ago, this book was written, that the talisman of Saturn must be gathered up, and the places where this talisman exists is this is the countries he named 20 years ago: Iraq, Iran, and Syria. And I was dumbstruck by that because that's exactly the countries that are, of course, on Bush's wish list. And I began wondering, what is really going on here, and why are they doing this? And it goes back to even some of Hitler's searches and things. And so I don't know. I think that I think you're absolutely right. I think there seems to be a master plan that somebody at the top, and it can only be a very few people because most of the people just have no idea, and I know a lot of them. So I guess my final conclusion is, there's probably 9 or 10 people, probably 9 people at the top, and they seem to be directing these agencies towards the final climax of history, as Terence McKenna would say.
But at the same time, John, many listeners have set enlightenment as their path. Is there a map? How do we elevate human consciousness to the realm that will illuminate that map, that pathway to the emergence of the cosmic person?
Well, it seems to be somewhat of a paradox, and nothing is predetermined. Free will is always the name of the game. And so it is a function of, two different people might experience the exact same situation in two completely different ways. But what I like to look at very carefully is the original teachings of the Maya that tell us about 2012, which is the end of the cycle, and they have a empirical anchor point for that, which is the solstice galaxy alignment. But there's also a spiritual teaching, and there's a method, or you might call it a technique, and there's a prophecy. And the prophecy is that at the end of the age, the limited ego will be ruling and ruining the planet. And the ego is the limiting function. And the method for transcending the ego, which is not to say annihilate the ego, but to surrender and place the ego back into correct relationship with the eternal, infinite source, and that is meditation, going within, opening up the little door at the top of the head that will let the light in and give us a direct experience or glimpse of that higher transcendent wisdom. And that wisdom place is the place from which everything comes. It's the origin and center of all manifest existence.
So, Jay, how would a listener then take a first step forward?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know if there even at this point in history. I'm not sure that there is a first step forward. It's already happening. It's going to happen to them whether they want it or not. John is right. It's much better for one to become aware of this through their own practices than to let it happen from without. To let it happen from within is a much wiser course of action. But it's going to happen to everybody, and I'm afraid there's going to be a lot of casualties of people who have no idea why they're suddenly receiving and entering into ideas that they had not considered before, and this could, in fact, drive them mad. I think that we're going to have more and more interdimensional and hyperdimensional events. I think they're already happening. I think you're going to see the veil between the dimensions diminish until around 2012. Maybe it's a little bit further downstream than just 2012. As John says, it's a 30-year cycle or so. So these things are just going to keep happening. We're going to have increases in psychic disturbances, UFOs, visitors, all sorts of things are going to be going on, and none of us are really going to be sure what's happening until that moment when we finally, as a group, are enlightened, and we're heading towards that. And enlightenment and initiation are not always easy things, and frequently in initiations people die or are hurt. And this is why it's so important to get the word out now, because if you're not ready for what's about to happen, it will hit you like a wall. And so that is why I think it's very important for people to return back to the perennial wisdoms that exist still on our planet and learn how the people of the past coped with these things so that we can cope with them. And this is coming on like a train, so we better really rush to get with it. And I think meditation is a good thing for us to be doing at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. I think the ancients could see things that we simply can't, but likewise, we're entering a period when we will see things we've never seen before either.
Yep.
And perhaps maybe the ancients never saw as well. And so, in a sense, we're all kind of beginners at this, but at the same time, I'm convinced there are many, many advanced souls walking around. What are some of the signs, we've talked about psychic abilities, we've talked about perceiving other dimensional entities and that. What are some of the other signs, John, that we should start paying attention to?
Well, I think in the political arena, on the world stage, a sign for me is just the increasing irrationality of everything, the absurdity of everything, the rational structures upon which the Western world was based, Western science, and those structures are man-made, and they don't allow for a larger vision of the world. As Jay was saying earlier, there's a much bigger, mysterious universe out there that simply does not fit into these rational containers. And yet, that larger cosmic universe has to come in if we are to evolve. We have to open up and let it in. So, the world, on the world stage, in the political arena, unfortunately, we see a lot of irrationality happening. To open up to the higher transcendent wisdom doesn't mean that you have to adopt an irrational stance, but the structures that have been built up do sort of break down and respond that way. So it's kind of like the old teaching that a thing has to be broken apart before it can hold a lot more.
Yeah, and that's why I was so excited to talk with you guys, because to me, a roundtable discussion with you guys is like circling the wagons and saying, enough of the crap. It's time to stop disrespecting the planet, time to focus on the opportunity in front of us. And so on that note, Jay, what are you working on these days? How can people get more involved in your work and some of the things that you're doing?
Well, right now, I'm finishing up a film. I'm shooting it right now. I'll be shooting it for the next month or so, 2 months, and it's about this whole subject, so I'm really happy to participate in this because it's helping me with this film. but we're creating a film called 2012: The Odyssey. It's going to have Greg Braden, Gene Houston, John, myself, hopefully you, William, and we try to find a way to get to Nashville or something to shoot you. We're going to Chichen Itza, to Peru, France, all over the world to shoot this, and it's going to be very exciting. A lot of people are participating, and it's going to address this question. I'm trying to create an alchemical vehicle to create the future. You know, most people don't think about the future very much, and if you don't think about the future, then you can't create the future. The masters of our world, however, are thinking of the future, and so we're following their plan. But I've decided that maybe it's time for us to create our own future, and through the medium of film and video and radio, that's what I hope is going on. So I think the future can be created by us, as opposed to, during history, the future being created by the people that run the place. And I think that in itself is going to cause this thing to topple. So we don't know exactly what's going to cause it to flip over. There's so many things going on now. It's like being in a crossfire. But I think that soon the fog and mist will disappear, and we're going to realize with crystal clarity exactly what this reality is. And when that happens, this age will end. In other words, this age isn't going to end from something without. It's going to end from something within. And then the next chronological sequence can begin, because the Mayan calendar doesn't end on that date. Just this age ends on that date. It's very important for people to understand that.
Thank you, Jay. John, what are you working on these days? How can people get more involved with your work?
Yeah, Jay, that's right. It's really important to understand that it's a cycling over to the next cycle. And also, yeah, I agree, too, that prophecy isn't necessarily a vision of something that's out there in the future waiting for us. It's prophecy can be an invocation of the intention that we have for creating our own future. Right now, I was interviewed by the History Channel down in Mexico, and that is a documentary called the Code of Prophecy, and it's part of the Decoding the Past series. It should be airing on the History Channel probably in mid-February. And also as a beginning of the year special on my website, alignment2012.com, I have 3 DVDs that I'm offering, and that is really a good introduction to my work, presentation DVDs with questions and answers and so on, as well as my books that are available in bookstores, Maya Cosmogenesis and Galactic Alignment.
Very good. Well, great job, guys. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you so much for your time. I hope you'll let us get back together again as more news comes available. We'll certainly be looking forward to all your comments.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, William.
This is William Henry, the Dreamland. Look forward to seeing you next time.
You're about to experience something you just can't get elsewhere. Emmy Award-winning science reporter Linda Moulton Howe reporting on the absolute leading edge of science discovery and the true mysteries of the unknown. Don't miss her website, earthfiles.com, the one science website that tells you the secrets and gives you the facts the others dare not. earthfiles.com. This week, she's reporting on close encounter witness Jim Sparks and his experiences with language and ET communication. Here she is from Albuquerque, Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Whitley. It was a decade ago at a 1995 conference I was introduced to Jim Sparks. He described totally conscious encounters with extraterrestrial biological entities that he said were, quote, small-grade drone worker types and taller true aliens or supervisors, unquote. Jim explained that a few years before, in 1988, he was happily married and was thriving in real estate development, working both in Texas and North Carolina. Then suddenly, he came face-to-face with beings from another world. Jim Sparks told me that at first he had dozens of what he thought were repeating vivid dreams about floating from his bed at night out through a guest room window to a place filled with computer screens. He thought he was losing his mind. And then after one episode, on his guest room carpet, he found dozens of petals and leaves from a honeysuckle plant that grew outside the window he kept floating through in his, what he thought were dreams. The flower petals and leaves were embedded in his own footprints, sunken in the thick carpet. In fact, one footprint had only the front half of his foot on the guest room side, and the heel was on the other side of the glass window, as if his foot had walked through the glass, leaving the heel on one side and the front half in his carpet. After sundown, Jim knew the humid air settled on the grass and that anything in his lawn would cling to bare feet. And that hard physical evidence on his guest room carpet was the turning point for an escalation in the number and intensity of abductions after that. It was as if Jim was being slowly introduced to another reality, and once his mind accepted that he was actually going somewhere at night, the other reality took him more often. Not only does Jim Sparks describe at least 2 abduction methods, he might have the answer about why 3-dimensional gold symbols are placed over telepathic upload, download movies and communications from the gray non-human beings to humans.
I think when a craft or a ship is on the ground, that you get escorted back and forth with advanced technology, naturally. To, after all, walk through a wall. Somehow they create a field and break down the matter. The matter stays intact, but somehow I'm not sure how it works, but it does. But nonetheless, that's going the easy way. You're escorted. And there's another way of getting pulled, which I do not like. In fact, it's horrific because it torques your body. It's hard on everything. And that's when I think a craft is actually in flight, passing by, hovering over, and I call that being pulled the hard way. And the hard way is miserably uncomfortable. I've had hard pulls. In the beginning, the hard pulls were when I was sleeping. And then as things went on, months turned into years, and there became a conscious interaction. The first thing that I would notice on a hard pull is that you would start to hear a whirling, whipping sound that the RPMs would slowly increase. So it would sound like as if somebody was taking, like a jump rope, I guess. When you have a jump rope and it goes, and then as you do the jump rope faster, so it's a whipping, whirling sound, but it would start at a low RPM, and it would paralyze you. So that's what you would hear, and you would hear it inside your head. And as that whirling sound, the RPMs increase, you would feel a sensation in your body, like coming from the center of your stomach, spreading out and going up to your upper torso, of a paralyzing sensation. And then it would the whirling, whipping sound would get louder and faster and louder and faster, and this, I don't know if it's you're breaking down, I don't know what it's doing, but it's starting to come up to your torso, towards your heart, and it increases, and it gets to the point where it's screaming in your head, and you get this sensation that you're going to die. And of course, who wants to die? So you're screaming inside your head, and you're hearing this stuff inside your head, but you're completely paralyzed, and you're going, no, no. It's like you don't want to let go, and it's getting louder and louder and louder until it gets to an extreme, you black out. And blacking out means totally unconscious. And then when you regain consciousness, you're there, aboard a craft.
What would be around you?
In the beginning, I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I was sitting up on something that was like a bench. In front of me was like a desk that was just nothing but a big screen, approximately 6-8 feet from my face to something that looked like a wall with a wall screen. So there was a table screen and a wall screen. My head could move up and down, and my right hand would lean on this table screen, and my right hand could move, but I couldn't move my hand off the screen or anything. My right forefinger that could move would act as something that could draw letters, symbols, and stuff like that. I had no clue where I was. I had no understanding as to why I was there. I didn't know who did this, what did this. I mean, if you can imagine, first of all, going through the trauma of being pulled. And my experiences have been pretty much, in every case, totally conscious. The first thing I heard and knew from any other source, which is they didn't let me see them at first either, everything was a slow break-in, it took months and years, was I found myself there in this paralyzed state, and my first instructions were A. And you're thinking, what do you mean A? Well, as it turned out, the alphabet, A, B, C, all the way to translate what was an extraterrestrial version of the letter A, whether they had made it up for the purpose of trying to teach us, I don't know, to what our version of an A was. I hated everything about being there. I hated the fact that I wasn't asked. I hated the fact that it wasn't like, hi, we're from wherever, and would you like to learn something new? It was constantly being forced, and so most of my time and my energy, I hate you. You don't understand what we are about. You have no clue. You should ask. You don't know what dignity is. You don't know what respect is. So I was more involved in fighting and opposing, arguing. Any instructions that were given, it was my goal to do the opposite and make them as miserable about their task as they were making me about just even being there. I did everything I could just not to cooperate. In those beginning stages, it was a letter would come up on this workbench in a shadow-like form, and I would simulate an equivalent to that letter A. Now we're talking two-dimensional flat surface. Then it would show up also on a wall screen. And then as the sessions progressed and as the abductions progressed, and they assimilate data, I'd say anywhere from 10 to 100 times faster. That's why it's difficult to communicate with the gray, and that's why they don't like questions, is because they're already 100 times faster than the way your mind is doing things, and it would be like trying to communicate with a monkey or something. Mm-hmm. We always ask the same questions. Who are you? Where are you from? Blah, 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 blah. So I learned over the years you just don't ask anything, and then you get the information you want by just keeping your mouth shut, and it'll come to you through them. It did progress to a holographic, for lack of a better word to use to define it, floating in the air, but when you would look at these things that were in the air in front of you, you could see through it. So it would almost be like, well, just like like a weak hologram would be, only the light wouldn't be very bright. It would be floating in the air in front of you, and it could be either a scene, a nature scene, it could be a table, it could be letters, it could be symbols, it could be all of these things. I had an abduction experience where it was like a mothership kind of training thing or abduction thing where we were in a corridor, and the corridor opened up into this huge thing that looked like almost the size of a basketball gymnasium, even bigger. But when you looked at the ship from the outside, it looked smaller, but once you were in there, all of a sudden it's this huge thing. We were being seated in front of these things that looked like monitors. And scenes were coming up on these monitors that were Earth scenes, like beautiful, crystal, pristine skies with beautiful mountain scenes and all these nature scenes that would stay on the screen or the monitor maybe for 3 or 4 seconds, and then the monitor would go dark and you'd hear a hum, and then another scene would come up. It'd stay on for about 3 seconds, and then it would fade away, and there would be a dark screen, and you would hear a hum. You started relating to the hum almost hypnotic as these beautiful scenes came up. And then each Earth scene started getting uglier, and the telepathic message was, you're killing your planet is dying, as to what we were doing to the rainforest, the pollution, and all of this stuff to stop it. What really stood out with me was I was in this alien school hard class. The first 18 months were just, I was pulled 3-4 times a week, and this went on for a year and a half of finding myself, as I mentioned earlier, in front of this table screen and this wall screen and learning the equivalents of symbols to letters and numbers and whatever. But I noticed on these monitors on the bottom left, I saw the symbols that I learned back 88, back like 6-8 years earlier. And so I was more focused on the symbols on the bottom left than I was looking at the Earth scenes, and because I could decipher them. And so I had an interest in, what is this? I can decipher this stuff. And on the bottom left, what I was getting was every time one of those scenes would come up, I learned it was a filing system. And as I picked that up, I go, oh, that's a filing system. A telepathic loud voice in my head went, no, like you're an animal or a dog, like, one-word commands, as if, no, don't try and study the symbols. That's not what that's for. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to look at the scenes we're showing you here. But I couldn't help myself because I just kept looking at that and then figured it to be a filing system, and then I blacked out.
Now, in the context of these other people in the abduction syndrome who have had these downloads of what they think are like feature films running to their head with these three-dimensional symbols superimposed over the feature films, have you personally ever experienced anything like that?
Whenever that stuff is in use, which there is, the three-dimensional symbols associated with particular scenes and stuff, I don't know if that's supposed to associate a symbol with a movie, so it's like a subconscious or subliminal way of mind control, or it's a subliminal method for you to retain data of something you've seen, so when you see that symbol, maybe you know what it means. And so my experiences went from, like, you were in elementary school with A, B, C, and all this kind of stuff, to the next thing you know, you're getting something akin to the Encyclopedia Britannica in coin-sized symbols.
Jim, do you think that you needed the extraterrestrial technology to gather the encyclopedia information from the small dark circle, or do you think that you were able at that point to extract information on your own?
In order for the whole communication system to work efficiently, they have to be around. Whatever it is they're trying to communicate with you, if it's teaching, which I don't know. I'm always suspicious of anything they do, but it seems like their presence has to be there in order to make it work. And then once they're gone, science is left, meaning us, with bits and pieces that you actually can't decipher. They have an understanding of hiding or using other dimensions. In other words, you or I or an ET, a gray, can be literally occupying the same space at the same time, but maybe in a different frequency where you can't be seen or your presence can't be felt or heard. They're using other dimensions to work from in ours. So what I've surmised is that they can be, sometimes you see them shadowy, or sometimes you can have experiences where you're looking at a gray or an extraterrestrial, like you're looking right through their body, as if they're almost like ghost-like. Mm-hmm. Then there are other times where they seem pretty solid, but they're not quite, and then there are other times that they're physically 100% here. So they can be 60% in one dimension, the one they're working in or hiding in, so to speak, and then they can be 40% in this dimension. So they can work in this dimension from another dimension, and they can adjust the percentages just like you would with a rheostat.
Why do you think they do that?
Advanced technology. Say you wanted to study lions in their natural habitat. Well, there's extreme danger there, but you want to work with it as much as you can without harming yourself or being detected. So now you have tools to work with. First, you're noticing the mood of a lion, which is angry, but you want to get right close up to check it out. But so why not be 95% in your hiding dimension and 5% in the dimension or the reality of that lion, where you're ghost-like in a sense, so if he pawed at you, it would go through you and not harm you. You can vary the levels of your study by adjusting what percentage you want to be in this reality, so to speak, versus another one, so you can get the work done. It's just a tool. It's a technological tool.
You're saying that when people see the Ebens in a translucent form that they see through, or it's ghost-like, it's because they are protecting themselves from us.
Absolutely. Unless shown otherwise, I'm 98% convinced it's a technological tool. It's a defense mechanism, so to speak. It's just one of the tricks that they have in their big bag of tricks. So when they are translucent and you can see through them, it's because they've adjusted whatever frequency of being in this reality they want to be. They're in safe harbor in another dimension. I've learned through the years there are several dimensions out there. Some of them are created. There's nothing exists in them. And there's other dimensions that things actually exist in them, that whether they're alive in that dimension or not, or whatever they are. I think, when people see ghosts and things of that nature, that's just another dimension bleeding through.
Did the gray beings ever say to you straightforwardly or show you on one of the screens where their home base is, literally?
In the early years, I did ask a lot, and particularly what anybody would ask, where are you from? What's it like over there? And my interaction with these things in the early years were on a punishment-reward basis. If I was cooperating with trying to learn the symbols and the letters, which things evolved into me being more cooperative as the years went by, and then the reward session would be, you can ask a question. And when it came to that question, the answer was always the same. It's like they're from somewhere that it would be too difficult in human understanding to comprehend. The closest answer to being anything that anybody can relate to would be, we're star people. Where are they from? And over the years, when you say star people, I don't particularly think they really have a home. I think they're in a lot of places all the time, scattered, throughout the universe.
But Jim, what if they are from another dimension that is not even in this one?
Well, that is equally as possible. But see, here's what I've learned over the years with them, too. It's like they're so deceptive. They are the masters of deception. Deception on top of deception on top of deception. Because clearly they don't really want you to know these things. It's almost like what they say, you better start calculating almost the opposite equally as well in order to get somewhere as far as information is concerned.
So what is it that you think, after 18 years of experience with these gray beings, that they really want with us and with this planet?
It may even floor you when I tell you this. These crashes, when we find bits and pieces of perhaps whole ships, whatever the black budget people are doing and things of that nature, anything that we find that we think is a part of what their technology is them purposely crashing this stuff. So we'll think that's what their technology is. As a matter of fact, when we went from vacuum tubes to solid state technology, meaning quartz crystals and all that, big jump out of nowhere, and it's been suspected that some of the materials from these crashes led us to go from sort of an ancient technology to where we are now with, high-speed computers and everything. However, I feel like they're using a technology that they don't want us to know about or even venture in. So they drop stuff like that from the sky, so to speak. We're led to believe that when we find these things, like, wow, what is this? Or what is this disc here? Or what is this and what is that? And then we jump in leaps and bounds in our technology, but it keeps taking us in a direction that they have total control over, and it keeps us from actually going into the direction that they're in.
It's sort of the bait and switch. One military man back in the early 80s told me the gray beings lie, and we now know that some of the technology that we gain from some of the crashed discs doesn't work. It is as if they let us down a red herring to slow us down or deflect us.
Beautiful. I haven't heard that, but there you go. I couldn't be any more in league with that opinion. So that's the way you always have to think when it comes to them. If they can process data just in their mind 10 to 100 times faster, they have a mass telepathic consciousness.
Why are they here on this earth interacting with humans, animals, and earth life?
That I had always asked and couldn't seem to get a direct answer to, which was, why me? There were times when, again, I was a good laboratory mouse and I cooperated with their experiments, so I got my little reward session. And it was scene after scene of going back a few hundred years ago, then thousands of years ago, into something that looked like some sort of half-ape, half-human beings in the African savannah. And each and every case, I saw individuals in each of these separate scenes that had features of my own. So what I concluded by what they were showing me, the answer to that question was that they follow certain family lines throughout thousands, if not going back millions of years.
Which would be following bloodlines.
Yes. Now, what would the tracer element be to go from one individual to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other, and how? I'm not sure. But there's obviously some sort of tracking system that they have that follows certain lines and species, maybe in their eyes of human beings, with particular traits that is of use to them for whatever purpose. You may have some that are working with the military. You may have some that are just medical. God only knows. What I got out of that was that they tracked a particular or gene or family line somehow going back all the way to when we were kind of ape-like.
You and I have discussed that presidential briefing paper that I was shown in 1983, and there was a paragraph that said these extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapiens sapien. If that's true, then we humans are their laboratory project.
Well, the impression that I got also was, yes, I was led to believe on one occasion that the whole reason we're even here as humans is due to their manipulation. It's almost like there's an ownership. Their position is, well, got the right to do with anything that we own, because if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be here thing. I have a problem with that, but it may very well be true.
You can see more about Jim's experiences and many drawings related to the events in his relationship with the gray beings in my book, Glimpses of Other Realities, Volume 2, High Strangeness. The entire large third chapter was done in cooperation with Jim, and it is one of the best abduction syndrome cases that I've ever had the privilege of being able to both know the individual and to do some investigation, because so much of Jim's experiences have been conscious. In fact, he has never done any hypnosis whatsoever. And there is a wonderful new development that I just learned this week. He has been persisting since Glimpses of Other Realities came out almost 10 years ago in 1998 with his own manuscript. And by mid-June to late June of this year, there is going to be a release in paper of his book by the publishing company is called fifthworld.com. That is the number 5 THWORLD.com. They're going to make announcements at fifthworld.com at some point in mid to late June about Jim Sparks' new book finally being released. And at earthfiles.com, I'm going to, in this report with Dreamland, I'm going to put the working cover from that book in this report, which should be up when Dreamland is broadcast. And eventually, by July, I think that Jim's new book will also be at Amazon.com. And Whitley, I think this is a really, really important book for people to get who want to have an insight into one individual who seemed, for some reason, to be the hard student for years, trying to learn a language and numbers, and has been left with a residue that when he knows and sees about those three-dimensional gold symbols that we have talked about the last week or so, over the telepathic upload-download, he's convinced it is the Gray Ebens way of filing the information that is uploading and downloading, which is the first time that I've had that insight, and it makes some sense.
Linda, thank you very much.
Center is located. So I think this is really, really intriguing information that the Maya may have been tuned into the fact that there is a black hole at the center of the galaxy, and it is the place of a great mystery.
Jay, you've also been doing a tremendous amount of work in terms of research with the Galactic Center, but more from an alchemical perspective. From that viewpoint, what are you looking at the Galactic Center? What specific pieces of information are you focused on these days?
Well, right now I'm looking into the idea that life and consciousness itself appears to be emanating from the Galactic Center. Wilhelm Reich, in his classic book, Cosmic Superimposition, touches on this a little bit, but what it is the Earth is surprisingly floating in the ecliptic of the galaxy, and Reich postulated that streams of what he called orgone, or consciousness-raising interplanetary, interstellar particles, we're penetrating through the stream of the ecliptic, and the Earth rides in that ecliptic like on a stream. And right now, we are beginning our tilt forward into the stream, and I think that is causing this giant change. I think when it's like a boat tilting into the wake, and it's at first it's a rocky ride, and then as soon as the boat gets into the wake, it becomes smooth again. I think we're in that rocky ride where the boat is trying to find its place inside the ecliptic stream of these incredible conscious particles which are coming from the center of the galaxy.
And so when you hear news, for example, about astronomers detecting an unusual powerful burst of intermittent radio waves emanating from the direction of the center of the galaxy, what does that make you think about?
I think we're in for the big change. I really do. I think the fact that this stuff is just all coming up all at once, and even Paul LaViolette has connected some of these emanations to earthquakes and tidal waves. I think this is all it is all connected, and I think it's really, truly amazing. We seem to be coming into contact with our consciousness to the reality of the galactic core. Kind of brings forth some of the New Age prophecies of the 70s and 80s, where we were going to join the Galactic Council and Timothy Leary and all these things. And then here we are at the beginning of the 21st century, and while we're not in contact with actual members of a galactic council or anything, at least I don't think we are getting in contact with the reality of what it is, what the center of the galaxy is, and why it is the most important object in our local neighborhood here.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that mythologically speaking, the Milky Way herself matches the myths of Isis and other great mothers who were connected to the symbol of the dove, the great bird, other such symbols. And I'm so intrigued by that inscription above the Isis's temple at Sais that read, yes, "I am that which is, which hath been, and which shall be, and no man has ever lifted the veil that hides my divinity from mortal eyes." If we assume, or just for a moment hypothesize, that Isis is symbolic of the Milky Way galaxy, it appears that we have lifted the veil that hides the black hole or the theoretical black hole at the center of the galaxy. And what I wonder, does this mean that transness is unfolding right before our eyes, highlighted by a flurry of recent new discoveries about the Milky Way galaxy? The new discoveries include NASA's snatching from the heavens of a pure white crystal called stardust, mystery radio waves coming from the galactic center, and profound new looks at the Milky Way center. These discoveries are setting the stage for the unfolding of powerful new knowledge. These discoveries could be among the greatest ever made. But is it possible that the ancients already knew much about the galactic center that can aid our modern quest for understanding? Our guests today have been examining the perennial wisdom about our galaxy in this moment in time. John Major Jenkins and Jay Widener are two leading galactic center theorists who realize this is humanity's chance to utilize great galactic forces for spiritual renewal and the blossoming of humanity. John Major Jenkins, in his seminal work Maya Cosmogenesis 2012, deciphered the ultimate meaning of the Maya end date of December 21st, 2012, the date used by the Maya in their long count calendrical system. What Jenkins discovered was that the Mayan priests knew of this end date as the renewal and rebirth of a new world age resulting from the solar meridian crossing the galactic equator and the Earth aligning itself in humanity with the center of the galaxy. John, welcome to Dreamland.
Hello, William. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. One of the more significant encodings of galactic information into a stone monument is the Cross of Henday, located in Henday, France, as well as the cross at Urcos in Cusco, Peru. In his book, The Mysteries of the Great Cross of Henday and a Monument to the End of Time, Jay Widener cracked the code of this mysterious pillar of Henday, and he used that pillar as a needle to thread together a profound tapestry of secrets about our galactic center. Jay's a Hermetic scholar and a filmmaker. His DVD, Secret of Alchemy, is a Dreamland favorite. Jay, welcome.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, it's great to have you guys together. It seems like the last time I saw you guys together was back forming from mortal to immortal beings with such knowledge.
I think that Isis is the queen of the golden age, and she's the virgin of the world, and she is also represented by the black Madonnas. And should we remember that a lot of the Isis statues in Egypt were painted pure black. And I think this goes back to what John was talking about. It seems as if the Egyptians and the alchemists of medieval Europe knew about this black hole and knew that everything emanates from this thing. And this is why they painted the primal spirit of Isis as black. And I think that is exactly what's going on. And I think they knew it. Are we going to be immortal? I don't know. But if you really like to read something interesting, read Isis, Virgin of the World, from Manly Hall's Secret Teachings. And he quotes La Plagnon, who talks about how Isis permeates the planets and the stars of the entire, galaxy. It's really quite amazing.
John, if the myths of Isis as the great cosmic mother do refer to the galaxy, what are your thoughts from the Maya perspective, or even from the perspective of the perennial wisdom? Are we on track to lift the veil separating us from immortality?
That is what's going on, and there is a very deep connection between the ancient Isis archetype of the great transformer, as well as the Virgin Mary. And in the Mayan mythology, the Milky Way was very, very important, and they mythologized it in many ways. The Milky Way could be the Great Mother, and then the galactic center, which is basically visible to the naked eye. I mean, you can observe it. It's the wider part of the Milky Way between Sagittarius and Scorpio, and it has brighter stars there. And the Maya thought of it as the womb of the Great Mother. And
in Denver, Colorado, a couple of years ago at an international book fair.
I think that's true, right, in the summer.
It was like, as JFK used to say about JFK, he was the single greatest assemblage of brains since Thomas Jefferson ate breakfast together, or ate breakfast alone. And then we also have, this amazing confluence of ideas where you guys are really putting your heads together and coming up with some astounding new information. So once again, really a pleasure to have you together here on Dreamland. What I wanted to start with is a proposition of this idea that our galactic core is releasing new emanations, especially let's start with the news about radio waves coming from the galactic center. John, I'd like to begin with you, just if you could provide us a basic picture of what lurks at the center of our Milky Way galaxy.
Well, as astrophysicists have been discovering, there are many galaxies out there, and many of them have black holes. These black holes are singularities in which there's a breakdown of time and space, and even light cannot escape from them. Now, what I would sort of put on the table from the vantage point of Mayan creation texts is in these creation texts, the hieroglyphs speak of creation happening at a black hole. I mean, the hieroglyph is literally translated as black hole. And this happens in the context of, it happens at the center of the sacred tree. So these Mayan creation texts are saying creation happens near the black hole at the center of the sacred tree. And we know that the Mayan sacred tree is the place where the Milky Way crosses over the ecliptic. And this place in the sky, in Sagittarius, is where the galactic